Hey there, hi everybody, welcome to the Sunday night. So, what I want to talk about is the latest sort of terror attacks in Moscow, how this might tie in to the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus coming up in April. Also, be briefly mentioning economic factors and then just covering a few bits and bobs of recent developments. Okay, let's get right to it. Just have a look at this picture here now. First of all, the fact that it happened on the 23rd of March. This is important. First of all, if you do it the American way, the date is 322, which is Skull and Bones number. Skull and Bones, of course, secret society at Yale, from which George Bush, many others come. I think Steve Bannon as well. Might be wrong on that one, but that's important. What else happened on 322? Well, we had the Brussels airport terror attacks. I think that was 2017. We had the Westminster Bridge attack. Oh, that was definitely 2017. Brussels might have been a bit before. Boulder, Colorado theater attack. I think there was also a theater one. COVID lockdowns were announced that particular day in many, many countries in 2020. Who could ever forget that? Now, what immediately struck me is, why did these things all happen in a theater? Like the Bataclan, that happened in a theater. And then I began to think back to something that happened, I think it was 2002, but we're going to be looking at that in Moscow. It's the second time there's been a major attack at a theater in Moscow. And I think, why is it always in a theater? So I think currently 144 people have been killed. 4 people directly involved, so they're sort of looking for 11 more. And the building pretty much burned down, which also, to me, I want to know how. When during the shootout did they have time? Because they've killed an extraordinary number of people, tragically injured many more, and they've had time to set the building alight. How did they get the materials, the accelerants, or the necessary equipment in to set the building alight? Because it's a modern building, very, very modern, in an upmarket complex. It surely wouldn't have been that easy to set a fire that would have caused so much damage. Did they have explosives with them? Very interesting. Apparently they jumped into a clapped out old car and went driving straight back to Ukraine. Would they do that? This seems very kind of unprofessional, unprepared. Surely they'd go to some sort of safe house, hide out for a few days, and then travel back to Ukraine. It's almost like too obvious. The other thing we must note is, other than the March 22nd, we also have the fact that it's the Crocus. Sorry, got the wrong picture up there. It's the Crocus concert halls. You've got CC again, so it's another 33. It's always the CC. Interestingly, about the Crocus City Hall, which we can go to there. There you go, it tells you all about it. And it's also, there's a mall there, and the mall apparently has a lot of high-end shops. And in the general complex, a lot of the units are vacant because there were businesses that have been affected by Russian sanctions, because they're mainly international businesses and shops there, and they've had to close down because of sanctions. So lots of empty retail space there. If you have a look at the building, who owns it, let's definitely check that out. Public capacity, it should be here somewhere. Major terrorist attack. It should tell us here who it's owned by, but I don't want to waste time. So let me just tell you, it's owned by a Russian who's a close associate of Donald Trump. They have a lot of investments together. I think it's particularly in Las Vegas. And another thing is, because so much retail space was effectively vacant, the center wasn't making much money, it reminds me of 9/11, which also was a white elephant, because those two particular buildings, the Twin Towers, they didn't have adequate Wi-Fi, the plumbing was antiquated, the buildings were sort of falling apart, and they weren't that attractive for tenants. So a lot of the floors were vacant. So it was almost like, I'm not saying it's an insurance job, but one could go in that direction, couldn't they? So that was very interesting. Now, let's go and let's see if we have, so like at the Bataclan, it's in a theater. So it reminds me of this other event where there was a major attack in a theater in Moscow. It was here we have it, maybe. There we go, Moscow theater hostage crisis. This happened in 2002. It was the seizure of the Dubrovka theater in Moscow by Chechen terrorists, and they took 912 hostages, and it was a really big thing. And the people were trapped there for many, many days. I think they allowed out pregnant women, some foreigners, some children. I do remember the rather gross story of people having to defecate in the orchestra pit because they couldn't use the toilets, and it really got quite out of control. Eventually, the Russian authorities used a kind of fentanyl gas that they pumped in to knock them all out so that it was safe for the security forces to go in there. Before we get to this, I just wanted to say that it is an extraordinary high number of deaths, and you wonder if more than 4 people will be found and prosecuted. Now, although they tried to tell us that these were people driven by kind of extremism, religious extremism, etc., during interviews it came out these people were driven by money. They were paid. So it's not really a huge, they're more like mercenary type people, paid people, rather than, and it doesn't seem that they were that good at knowing what to do after the fact. I don't want to be too conspiratorial, but some of the pictures I've seen, there's some of the usual red flags, like no visible blood, no visible, people obviously in there had taken form. You can't really, you can hear gunshots, you can see a little bit, you can see people fleeing. There doesn't seem to be an extraordinary amount of panic. So I just wonder. Also, there was video of the attackers going into sort of a deserted concourse area outside, shooting at some people, but then the people were still moving afterwards, and again, no blood. I don't know, I don't want to be bloodthirsty or something, but sometimes these events just don't sit right, and one should always ask questions. Now, I also know that the Americans were warning American citizens in Russia to stay away from crowded places, and there were some kind of warnings going out, and Victoria Nuland apparently made some statements, etc. I think they kind of want us to immediately go to the fact that this is Ukraine and now Russia's going to want to take revenge. Something along those lines. Or I think the other way they want us to go is that this is revenge from Israel for Russian supporting Palestine, something like that, because there was some guy ranting that Russia was going to pay for its stance on RT. There was someone from Israel ranting about being really angry about Russia's stance in terms of the Palestinian conflict. So is it some sort of Mossad-inspired operation? Is it a Ukrainian-inspired operation? Or is it the Russian state? Because usually when these things happen, it's the state, and they want to use it to galvanize support for themselves or to bring in new laws for their own citizens. So let's look at this one that happened in 2002 in the theatre, because there's some interesting stuff that we can chat about, right? Just going to get back to the bottom here, day 4. See, it went on to day 4, so it really did last quite a long time. Reminds me a little bit of that hotel in India, because that also lasted, the siege of the hotel. But then whether that was bogus or not, who knows? Responsibility, aftermath. Oh, taking me a while to find this. Long-term consequences. See, there was an awful lot of mileage that was gotten out of this one if you look at the Wikipedia page. Absolutely tons. Okay, so here it says, claims of FSB involvement, right? So there was an independent investigation of this undertaken by Russian politicians Sergei Yushchenko, Sergei Kovalev, and journalist Anna Politkovskaya. And I don't know if you'll remember Anna Politkovskaya. She was in the news about a decade or so ago, and she was shot dead, murdered or assassinated in her apartment complex in the lift. Do you remember her? But I remember that name well. Also involved in this independent investigation was John Dunlop of the Hoover Institute, and guys, Alexander Litvinenko, who you'll know, obviously there's been a show on British TV. He was the guy murdered by polonium-210, and they said, it was in his tea at the Millennium Hotel, so-called. And another guy, Mikhail Trepashkin. When Litvinenko was murdered, Trepashkin was in prison in Russia, so I don't know what's happened to him afterwards. Now, according to their version, the FSB knew about the terror group's arrival in Moscow and directed them to the theater through their agent provocateur, Khan Pashka Turkabayev, Abu Bakr, whose name was on a list of hostage takers, and he left the theater alive. So when they say that 4 attackers have been arrested and they're kind of the remaining of the 11 aren't, it reminds me of this one where the main guy kind of manages to leave the theater alive. Strange. And where again the authorities have prior knowledge, and they kind of just aid and abet it happening. So it's not like they're actively involved, but they're passively aiding the situation. Interesting. So in April 2003, Litvinenko, who actually was murdered in '05, right, gave information about Terekibayev to Sergei Yushkinov when he visited London. And Yushkinov passed this file to Anna Politskaya, and she was able to interview Terebayev in person. Now, a few days later, Yushkinov was assassinated by gunfire in Moscow, and Terebayev, that was the assassin or the attacker that led this sort of hostage stroke murderous rampage on the theatre, he was later killed in an apparent car crash in Chechnya. So as we know, Litvinenko also stated in an interview with Australian TV program Dateline that two of the Chechen militants involved in the siege were working with the FSB, the Russian authorities. So here, and as I'm saying to you, we know Litvinenko went on to be murdered. Definitely Anna Politkovskaya got murdered. I'm not sure if any of the others were, but there you go. You get the theme. Now, I'm not thoroughly a total going to believe everything that Alexander Litvinenko says, because he was sponsored heavily by Boris Berezovsky, who is one of the key oligarchs. I think he ran the media that Putin had a bone to pick with, quite rightly, probably after the fall of Yeltsin, who was kind of booted out. He was also sort of accused of being one of the people who raped Russia. So what we get from this, if you look back in history at the other theater attack, is that there's involvement by the state. The state is either actively, passively, or a mixture, egging this event on and helping it to happen, then covering it up, and actively getting rid of anyone who asks questions about it. So maybe this is actually something that, was worked on by the Russian state in order to what? Give them excuse to up the ante in Ukraine, because again, with Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, it coincides with the Crimean War and with the period before Operation Barbarossa, when things got really, really bad in World War II for Russia. Although Russia came out on top, right? It was the turning point in a way. So we are expecting an increased level of conflict. Plus, it was reported by Patrick Henningsen that France, Germany, Poland now have regular troops on Ukrainian soil. So we now actually have active NATO involvement. I think as far as the Green Berets and the SAS, they've been there a while already. But you can see that this whole region is really, really hotting up. Okay. So another thing to mention as well, I know that a lot of people on our side like to look at Putin. We maybe appreciate some of the things he says, and we hope that he's going to be a leader pushing back. But a point was made. Now, are the people in the West, the New World Order kind of people, are they so incompetent that they have almost, now George Galloway always uses the phrase, going to a great effort to pick up an enormous stone only to drop it on your own foot? So that's what they've effectively done, because what have sanctions against Russia done? It's forced Russia to become more streamlined. It's pushed them into the waiting arms of China, who's supposed to be America's biggest competitor, biggest industrial competitor, whatever, technological competitor. It's forced Russia and China closer. So that's an own goal. It's made Russia more economically, militarily, and strategically focused. It's actually strengthened Russia. And I know from living in South Africa, sanctions do that. They make a country more resilient, especially a country like South Africa, or in this case, Russia, who already have a vast amount of natural reserves. It's encourages innovation and resilience through the country being involved in a number of things rather than just importing it. Like for example, Port Talbot, the steel. Now the UK have totally lost the ability to produce any of their own steel because of the closing of the last kind of furnace or whatever it was in Port Talbot. You can't fight a war without steel. So we are weakening, well, I say we, the UK, Germany, through the problems with energy, through that Nord Stream debacle, and America all becoming weaker strategically, militarily, and economically, while Russia's becoming stronger. Do you really think that they were that incompetent? Or are they trying to hand over power to the East because it will be of strategic advantage, perhaps to Israel, who hope to play a linchpin due to their position right near the Suez Canal in the Belt and Road? And they're sort of positioned at the doorstep of Asia meets Europe, okay, in the Middle East there. So that's a question, right? Okay, I think that the some people have been asking, will the stock market crash in April? Now that it usually crashes in October, but we might see some events in April because things could go bang at any time now. I mean, quantitative easing has stopped for almost 18 months. It's not going to be long before this whole thing really implodes. So it definitely could be that I might mention. I do want to mention that briefly. Just going to get back to the page I wanted to show you. It could actually be that the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus, the sign of money, is enough to cause some major event. And we have this solar eclipse conjunct Chiron as well, which says that the stock market is incredibly wobbly. The world financial system is incredibly wobbly. So maybe they do need an escalation in war to detract, because when all else fails, they take us to war. So maybe the war agenda going through the roof plus the stock market thing are tied in for a reason. And that's why we see this huge amount of activity this April, the total solar eclipse in Aries, and also this Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus. There it is, the last UK coke oven at Port Talbot shut down today. Without coke we can't make steel, and without steel we can't fight a war. So that is pretty interesting as well. Yes, I do want to cover that too. I'm just going to pause for a second here. Yeah, so before we go to this particular clip, or it's not really a clip, I'm just going to have a look at this tweet of Galloway. I definitely think that the Russian thing, we shouldn't leap to conclusions that it's Ukraine or Mossad or whatever. This could be a domestic, for domestic policy or domestic purposes. Now here, this was rather interesting. Now, you'll get people like Gary Lineker who'll tweet on behalf of Palestine and who will show this kind of faux concern, I would say, for Palestine. So here Galloway says, no pundit, no team, no organization spoke out when Palestinian football star Mo Barakat was bombed in his home. And his killers, Israel, are still in every competition. So I thought, yeah, funny how all these people in the BBC and Lineker, they won't mention that. And that's why I do think a lot of the support you see, or what would he say, the less, some people will say BBC on the side of the Palestinians, and people like Lineker are. I don't think they really are. I think it's just some sort of limited hangout, actually. I don't think it's sincere. I just think it's to give the impression that both sides of the story are being put out there. This was very interesting. My mom loved this one because she's been saying this for ages. It's from David Knight. He says, why, if they're fine spending trillions more than they take in taxes annually, and the income tax is only a portion of the taxes they take in, why is there income tax? I mean, if deficits don't matter, and we've got this modern monetary theory, or modern monetary theory, why are we bothering taking tax? And I think that's absolutely true. They want to impoverish us, punish us, and destroy the middle class. That's what tax is about. It's not about a contribution to the joint coffers, because at this stage it doesn't matter. In theory, it might have mattered at one point. Now it doesn't really. You could trillions and trillions. America go into an extra trillion of debt every 3 months. So why bother with income tax? It's a drop in the ocean. It would be better to let people have the money, spread to boost the economy. Don't take it. I mean, not to mention all the other bad things they do with the tax. And it's the same in the UK. Now, Biden was giving a speech. Now, this is the kind of thing that appeals to a person who doesn't really think things through, who's economically ignorant. And it also appeals to loads of people on the left, because they just want the rich to be punished. So he was saying that there are over 1,000 billionaires in America, and he wants to tax them at 25%. And he said over 10 years, I mean, the world could end in 10 years. But anyway, in 10 years, probably will, given what I'm going to be talking about in the next thing with the solar eclipse. But anyway, and what's going on May 20. So, April 20, sorry. So he said, we'll collect, it was like 500 billion. Over 10 years, by increasing income tax on billionaires, they would collect 500 billion. So that's $500 billion, when every 3 months they add an extra trillion to the debt. But you can imagine so many people out there cheering it on. Yay, let's vote for Biden. He's going to tax billionaires. It doesn't make a difference. Don't even bother. They probably won't even notice the tax. It won't bother. They're doing so many scams. It won't affect them. The money won't make a difference. It'll just appeal to some low-level intellect. So yeah, I really liked that tweet. I thought that was so apropos, if that's the word. Look at this one. Now, I never really liked this guy, Tusi. Couldn't take to him. He was a bit, well, yeah. I just turned me off. Now here, why was Maya Tusi, a virtually unknown YouTuber at the time, hanging out at the Aidan and Fizzy Barclays home in December 2019? Barclays is Britain's oldest bank, established 1690, and the billionaire Barclay family is quasi-royalty. Suspicion. Tusi is an intelligent asset planted long ago. And there's the picture there. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on my screen. Interesting, isn't it? So I just wanted to share those little bits and bobs with you because I thought, So let's recap. So we have regardless of what happened at the Moscow theatre, I would say, funny that it's a theatre, cui bono in this case. And I think a lot of the people who are conspiracy theorists are maybe jumping on the wrong bandwagon. Not that it really matters, because I do think there's going to be a massive escalation anyway, but because of the way the economy is going. Is Putin really on our side? No, there he's jumping in on the 22-3 thing. So I don't know. I think the FSB must have been involved to some degree. Okay, I have to touch on this, but I want to do it in a very, very, very delicate way because it's obviously a tricky subject. So now, I always have this in mind. If someone lies on the witness stand in court, the judge will, and they found out to lie because of subsequent questioning or evidence, the judge will tell you to view anything that witness said with skepticism because they lied once. So we now know, those of you who watch my channel, how much we were lied to, during the COVID thing, 9/11, weapons of mass destruction. I mean, it's continuous, right? All the time. And we know categorically now, I think everyone should know, we were lied to about the pictures of Kate and William at the farm shop. Now, the media ran with that. I'm not sure, because I didn't watch, if Sky and BBC thoroughly went with the footage that the Sun had, but they obviously showed it. I don't know if they said, oh, this is 100%. I'm not sure if they said that. But generally, the media took that on board. Then everyone was told they were conspiracy theorists because they didn't believe the farm shop video. But in light of the video from Kate, which came out also on 22/3, well, that means the farm shop was definitely fake. That was no way. That was a young woman in perfect health, bouncing along. Nothing wrong with her at all. So we know now that we were lied to all week by the media, and we were branded conspiracy theorists, but we were, well, say we, me. People were right to be skeptical about that, right? Have the media apologized? Then I believe Kevin Peterson, the South African but played for England cricketer, had been tweeting how bad all these conspiracy theorists were because he lives in Windsor and his kids go to the same school as Kate and Williams and he sees them all the time. Well, obviously that isn't true. Let's look at his timeline. Let's see what he said. Maybe he's retracted. I don't know. But he was like piling on to confirm the farm shop thing. So you see how these people work together, but when it comes to light that they had to be wrong, given further information, where are they? I also think it's odd because the kids aren't back at school now till the 17th of August, but I don't know why the kids are still off school. It's Kate and Williams' kids, not Kevin Peterson's. Yeah, so why are they off so long? Surely it's good for children to carry on having a routine, a sense of normality, seeing their colleagues and friends at school, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. None of my business. But, there is something. This remains a situation over which people are having many, many questions. Yes, people don't want to pry, but I actually think that there's no need for either Charles or Kate to say it's cancer. Why do that? I think they could actually keep that private and deal with it themselves. Although, I mean, also the curious thing is they told us initially that this was a not routine, but a scheduled surgery that Kate was having. But now that's also changed. Now they say, no, it wasn't scheduled. And her aides and everyone knew nothing about it. And it seems, well, her and Charles both go in for an operation. His is scheduled. Hers was supposed to be a scheduled operation. And then they have the operation, and then they both found out they had cancer. And then Fergie's got cancer. So there's a lot of that going around in the royals, The other thing, I'll just say that this isn't like conspiratorial or whatever, but the thing that really stood out for me, there's something I wanted to show you here. Not that. I don't think anything maybe it's not on my timeline. The other thing that stood out for me was the term preventative chemotherapy. You know, when someone is in a police interview and they give too much information, they always know it's a red flag. The police always know that as soon as a witness is volunteering more than they really need to say, that you should pay attention. Now, obviously, in the circumstance of being interviewed, it's sometimes the person's guilty and that's why they're giving too much information. Now, this isn't the same, but I felt that that was too much information. Why mention it? It just rang a huge flag. For a start, there was no need. She could have just said, look, I'm recovering slowly and blah, blah, blah. I don't think it was necessary to mention cancer. I don't think it was necessary to mention preventative chemotherapy. By the way, do watch this clip, guys. The disappearing ring. I don't know if you can see it. It's quite an odd one.
Wow.
See it if I show it to you. Yeah, you can watch that while I'm talking here. So that rang a bell, and I just thought that, the British media, for some reason, when we first came to this country, the immediate thing I noticed in comparison to South Africa was the news was full of health, full of what I would call morbidity. You couldn't turn on particularly BBC News without hearing a story about AIDS, cancer, lung disease. It was so depressing. In fact, I didn't like watching the BBC never had since I came here, really. There is this kind of need they have to go on about health, almost like they want to talk people into sickness, or talk people into they must have more tests, more pharmacy. I suppose it's strategy, and they love a health story. I mean, the lens they went to on Jade Goody. I couldn't turn on the TV for weeks because the drama that played out. Then we had the drama with Kate Garraway's husband with the long COVID and the COVID, what was going on with him. They played that out. Remember, there was that other lady, Deborah James, her name, who had some sort of cancer as well. And we had her entire health story played out in to the max in the paper. So they love a health story. I don't want to get too fine a point on it, but anyway, I do think that the people, the conspiracy theorists, obviously haven't been settled down. They are still talking about deep fakes. I'm not going to talk about deep fakes. I know nothing about it. Really, I don't know nothing about it, but I'm not going to get into that. But I would say that on my analysis of Twitter, people are more curious than ever. And people are still wondering what is indeed really going on. Now we have Judaini disappearing in Portugal. It just seems to be a capitulation of the world. I don't know. We don't really know. We don't know what's going on. We know what we've been told there. But then, in context of the last 4 years, we've been told an awful lot of stuff. And it's all emanating from similar sources. So it's interesting, guys. Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on that in the most delicate way possible, because it's not a subject everyone likes to talk about, because people don't want to talk about health and all that. Yeah, but I don't think it was necessary really for them to tell that. They could have kept that, just come out so that everyone had seen the people will settle down. But I think what they're doing is feeding the conspiracy theorists. That's why I went on about like the Nicola Bully thing. It was feed it. Perhaps as an eventual crackdown on free speech, because they know people are insatiably curious, they can't stop, and the whole world has always been something people have speculated on, Diana and everyone, and people are used to speculating and getting really drawn into it. So I've just dropped you a few little hints there of things that I've been thinking, and you can share your thoughts with me. Thank you for some of the lovely comments. I know people really enjoyed the George Galloway one. Wasn't just about George, with other stuff as well, regarding his election, and we'll enjoy this. Now, a really interesting one coming up hopefully tomorrow, and that's again on Jupiter, Uranus, in relation to the red heifers and Armageddon. And obviously I'm going to do one solar eclipse. Those two kind of tie in a little bit to each other, but this also ties in a little bit to that. So take care.